Hello guys, welcome to a new series I'm starting named The Past, Present, and Future of a Tower. Today I'm going to talk about possibly the greatest early game tower of all time, the Golden Scout. Golden Scout is a tower with plenty of history, so let's talk about its up and downs throughout its past, present, and future in both TDS and tower battles. On the November 29, 2018, Golden Scout was added into the game. It was a developer-exclusive tower, and almost nobody had an exact idea what it did. Many speculated it to be a tournament prize, similar to other ex-developer exclusive stuff such as the Golden Commando. Golden Scout was released together with Golden Commando on the 10th of August, 2018. Unlike most other towers, but like the Commando, it had a win requirement. You had to win 150 games to purchase it for a price of 3,500 coins. When Golden Scout was released, it was astoundingly mediocre. It was outclassed by the overpowered Aviator in every aspect. Its slow fire rate meant hordes of weak enemies will easily leak. Not only that, its ability to grant other towers hidden detection is done better by Aviator for a much cheaper price. The only strengths it has was better single target damage. Oh, yeah, its range was also pretty pathetic. Just a week later, it got buffed. The most problematic upgrade, which gave towers around it and itself hidden detection, had its price reduced half. It was a pretty big buff. Despite the tower now being decent, many still disliked the Golden Scout, and the win requirement was viewed as too high, and the problems of it not having enough range or fire it wasn't fixed. Almost a year later, on the next major update, the Golden Scout was surprisingly reworked. Its fire rate decreased by 0.1 second on every level, and the range at max level would increase from 16 to 18. These are small buffs, but they do remedy the existing problems of the Golden Scout. But they came at a huge cost. The level which gave hidden detection to itself and the surrounding towers had a huge price increase from 1,500 to 3,800. It now costs 600 more than it did on release, when it was considered to be an extremely mid tower. It also had a minor visual overhaul. As a result of these changes, Golden Scout was significantly worse than before. However, it wasn't as bad as it was on release, mainly as other options, such as the Aviator, have received harsh nerfs. Even so, this nerf was far from justified, given that the conditions needed to obtain this tower is quite demanding, so naturally, it should be better than towers that are obtained for less coins. The amount of disdain for Golden Scout at this time was far more tag release, despite it being much better than it was then. This is mainly because Golden Scout on release was buffed only 7 days after, and hence people didn't really have time to grind for it and be disappointed after. While this time, Golden Scout was not changed for a whole year and more. People who spent so much time grinding for it was going to be left disappointed. Over time though, people began to appreciate the Golden Scout more and more for its ability to do well. Relatively late game. Towards the end of 2021, Golden Scout received 2 buffs, and those would be the last balance changes Golden Scout would ever receive. Its fire rate would be improved at earlier levels, and the upgrade that gave hidden detection had a decent reduction in cost. Both buffs were sized decently and improved the Golden Scout without breaking it. Today, the Golden Scout is surprisingly one of the best early game towers. It carries into late game way better than any other early game tower, even better than Commando, which is not a early game tower. It also has hidden detection, which deals with hidden boss rush, the most deadly rush. Its old weaknesses remain, but not as prevalent as before. Other early game towers have far more drawbacks. The only real competitor is the Marksman, which has lower DPS and face all the same problems as Golden Scout, albeit with more range. The G-Scout is still preferred for its efficiency. Maybe it was the preferred outcome for such a hard-to-get tower. I would talk about the future of the TB Golden Scout, but I don't think tower battles in general has a future with Plaintearth moving on to other things in his life. Now, I am going to discuss the Golden Scout in TDS, and I am going to go into much more detail. Golden Scout in TDS is much different from in tower battles, however, as it ties extremely closely to the regular Scout, only separating from it much later in its history. This is because the Golden Scout was initially released as a skin. Tower Defense Simulator had implemented a skin system far before tower battles, and Golden Scout was hence implemented as a skin on the October 27, 2019. Golden skins were obtainable via the Golden Skin Crate, costing 50,000 and containing for towers the Scout, Pyromancer, Crook Boss, and Minigunner. The initial 3 was released earlier on the 18th, while Golden Cowboy and Soldier would be later added. The golden skins were initially released to just be a collector's items, with no other changes, but it took the developers less than a week to realize that wasn't going to work, and implemented small buffs for the towers. The Golden Scout was set to follow the same trend. Being the weakest tower from the Golden Crate, it would be expected to get the biggest buff. Well, the buffs other towers have are underwhelming anyways, with Golden Crook Boss receiving only a 10% damage buff and Pyro with a 25% range buff. However, the Golden Scout would be different from the others. In the same update, Golden Crook Boss damage buff and Golden Pyro's range buff would be increased to 25% and 50% respectively, but Golden Scout would be on a whole different level. It would have a damage buff from 100% to 300%. How would that work? At level 0, 1 and 2, the damage increase would be at 100%. At level 3 and 4, the damage increase would be 150%. At level 5, the damage increase would be 300%. Oh, the price of upgrading was also increased by 50%. The exact stats are shown above. Later the same day, the damage buff was reduced to 200% at max level, which had to be done, given that the max level was more cost-efficient than any other ranged tower in history. It was still a completely broken tower, so on the 9th of November it would be given a nerf, increasing the cost of all upgrades by 50%, and later in the same year, the day before Christmas, its cost would be increased by 100 on every level. This will be its stats after the changes. Now, one thing you might notice is that the base cost have not been increased, making spamming base Gossout the most efficient. It also made upgrading, specifically level 1 and 2, completely obsolete. Why was it a good idea for upgrades that cost 600 in total give only 2 range and hidden detect? Either way, the Golden Scout is no longer broken, but it was still a good tower with many believing it is the best golden tower, and Golden Minigunner would be its only competition for that title. During the solar eclipse event, the Scout was given a rework, and while it helped normal Scout, the Golden Scout was obviously the bigger benefactor. The rework gave Scout more damage, a much faster fire rate, with a marginal range decrease. The cost was also greatly increased.
A major visual overhaul also happened. Its model would not change again.
While the cost efficiency at max level would decrease slightly, it was an overall buff. The lower levels were all improved. However, upgrading the Golden Scout was still far from ideal, and the cost of base Scout being reduced from 250 to 200. This meant that if you joined Paradoxum Games Group, you could place 3 Golden Scouts at the start of the game, and they would be able to survive for a very long time while finishing waves quickly. Here are its stats after these changes. Golden Scout was really the best early game tower. It could handle everything and had no outstanding weaknesses, making it very easy to use. Other early game towers like Gladiator and Ace Pilot all had their weaknesses, either against single targets or having expensive hidden detection. Golden Soldier would come into the fray later on for its greater range and flying detection. it would be significantly less efficient than Golden Scout, making it worse for every game mode, other than hardcore. However, the problem with Golden Scout tied with the normal Scout was that if you adjusted one, you'd have to adjust both. Both needed to be changed separately. There were ideas floating around evolved towers, but the solution would eventually be found in the form of golden perks. Golden perks not only separated Golden Scout from normal Scout, the lesser problem, that is, having to use the golden skin to get the buffs, would also be solved, as after the change you could equip any skin and still get the buff as long as the golden perk is activated. This would be its stats after the change. It would not be changed ever again, at least, until this video was made. So, there are a lot of changes. The upgrades are so much more efficient than before, and, although they were still not as cost efficient as base Golden Scout, they could be worth upgrading for extra range and hidden detection. Every level was improved, even the max and the base level. Base level got a slight fire rate buff, while the max level was buffed in every stat. These changes were really good and absolutely necessary. Other than the fire rate increase of the base level, I suppose there were other changes I neglected, namely the fixing of the fire rate bug, which doesn't really affect Golden Scout significantly. Either way, although everybody acknowledged that Golden Scout was buffed, nobody really cared. A really good tower just became a really good tower. Well, since Golden Scout would not receive any more changes, you'd believe that this would be the end of its journey, but there is something else I would mention. See, from late 2023 onwards, Paradoxum games suddenly became a lot more active. It could be because of the release of TDS, or some other reason. Either way, big updates happen very often now, and with updates come balance changes. One particular balance change was that during the hunt event, the normal Scout was buffed. Why am I mentioning this? After all, Golden Scout is no longer tied to the Scout. Well, you see, this change doubled Scout's damage at base level, making both towers the same with difference of 0.3 fire rate. Needless to say, Golden Scout became the worst golden tower solely because of how similar it is to its base form. Few days later, and Scout would be nerfed back to what it was, because having the starter tower be a really good tower is not healthy. It was not really anything that important, but I thought this would be something interesting to share, given that these few days were probably the only ones that people believed Golden Scout to not be a good or at least decent pull from the Golden Crate. So that's about it for Golden Scout's history. So, let's go see how it places in the meta today. Despite being much stronger than it previously was, I think Golden Scout is in a much worse position in regards to the meta. Harder game modes, particularly hardcore, require either flying or lead detection in early game, which Golden Scout does not have. Swarms and flying enemies are also more common than events, which are generally more challenging, and G-Pyro and G-Soldier respectively can take care of these threats that Scout cannot, which is why I believe they are currently more valuable than G-Scout. Recently, the Golden Cowboy also received a massive buff. Now having a specialized early game tower is not necessary at all, so Golden Scout really is not that good nowadays. At least Golden Crook Boss will always be worse than it. Many people still believe that Golden Scout is the best golden tower, but I personally believe you could place Golden Scout anywhere between 3rd to 5th. So what's the future for Golden Scout? Well, personally believe that the developers are not going to touch Golden Scout for a while, as it has achieved a balance between being a really good tower, while not being broken and always being brought in every occasion. And I mean, why would it be touched? It hasn't been for so long, might as well keep it this way for consistency, though the model could be changing very soon. That is it for this video. I would appreciate if you subscribe or maybe drop a like, and if you want me to cover a specific topic, tell me it in the comments. Adios.